Hello, this is Dazzling One, and this week I will be covering the topic of human cloning. It is a topic that I have had requested in the past, and I did my best to evade it because it is so complex in nature, and there wasn't a lot of information I could find when I set out to research it, and I have to admit I had a bit of a bias thinking that when people said that certain celebrities and politicians were replaced by clones, I kind of scoffed at it. But after doing some careful research and just reading from people you probably are familiar with if you're interested in this topic, like Peter David Berter, I didn't necessarily check out much of Donald Marshall's work, and I did come across some of Fritz Springmeier, so I'll be referencing them in this video. So if you're like me and you like science fiction, you probably have indulged in different stories about human cloning. One I can remember that stuck out to me, I read it at the end of middle school or the beginning of high school, was about a girl who turned out to be a clone of her parents' dead daughter, which I thought was kind of creepy. And they have depicted this topic in books and movies like Jurassic Park, Genesis 2, Terminal Man, Star Trek, or Boys in Brazil is one huge example. Every time that I was asked to do an essay on a topic, I always gravitated to bioengineering, designer babies, stem cell research, human life extension, that kind of stuff interested me. But the thing about it is, like Fritz Springmeier says, they are about 30 years ahead of us in technology, and so what we think that is new is old to them. He actually said that what has developed is a situation where the American people are no longer in touch with where the elite's secret technology is. It is clear that the elite know this and are aware that some of the future shock needs to be reduced if they don't want to self-destruct society. You need to be aware, mentally prepared, that most of the readers of this will experience future shock when they read that. Cloning of humans is possible and has gone on for decades. The elite had a dilemma. If society isn't moved forward to match their secret scientific advances, it will soon be like cavemen meeting modern-day man. Society won't be capable of adjusting, only self-destructing. On the other hand, they certainly can't tell us what they are already doing, because they are using this technology against us to control us. For this reason, they are giving us movies that show us things that they have already invented. But these are put forth as fiction in these Hollywood films. They hope to lessen the future shock, which their own secrecy has greatly contributed towards creating, while maintaining control over the general population. So he discusses future shock in his book, and it is very true. If they come right out and tell us, hey, by the way, everything that you think you know is actually 30 years behind, then people will be appalled and people will want a revolution. But if they want to make the sort of leaps that they want to make, they need to somehow prepare us, and they've done so, and this is why science fiction seems to rule all of the modern movies and books. This is why dystopian universes with Terminator-like machines are all of the rave. In Daniel 12:4, it says, "But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." So one of the big signs of the last days was that knowledge would increase, and coincidentally, we live in the information age, or the digital age, where information is at the tip of our fingers. Of course, there's a lot of false information out there as well. In September of 1993, there was a newsletter, and there were two articles by this author on cloning, one entitled Clones, Synthetics, Organic Robotoids, and Doubles, and the other article, Dulce Genetic Research Cloning Facility. In the month following the September 93 newsletter's release, the establishment came out with stories about humans being cloned. This author said, "I felt that this was confirmation that God had directed me to publish the information I had on cloning half a month before the secular media came out with their stories about the first laboratory duplication on an embryo. This 93 cloning was the first publicly revealed and publicly accepted human cloning, but the truth is that it had already been done for about 30 years secretly." If you look at just a basic timeline that you could have in a science textbook or history textbook at school, you'll see that there was the cloning of a frog, back in the year 1977, I believe. It might be 78. There was also the cloning of Dolly the sheep, which was a huge deal because Dolly was a mammal, which meant that human cloning was possible. And then in 2013, they actually came out and admitted that they had worked on human cloning, but they never let the clones live to the full stage of development. So there are 4 types of clones, according to those who believe that they're out there. There are the regular clones, creatures which are reproduced by artificial means and which are exact duplicates of the original, when implanted in an embryo and fertilized, being born as a baby having a normal growth cycle. Peter David Berter was an American attorney and financier who lived between 1921 and 1987. He ran for governor in 1968 in the Republican Party primary in the state of West Virginia, although he was formerly a Democrat, but lost. And he recorded the audio letter cassette tape reports over a period from June of 1975 to November of 1982. In it, he described methods of human cloning. In letter 46, he made mention of the discovery of the molecular structure of DNA, the famous double helix in April of 1953 at Cambridge University in England. Scientists James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins were later to share the Nobel Prize. He claimed, it now has been over a quarter century since the crucial discovery of the DNA double helix, and since then research in molecular biology has not been standing still, but speeding up. In some cases, research has gone in directions which are deliberately sheltered from publicity because of the fear of public reaction. Not so long ago, for example, universities doing research into artificial microbes found their neighbors in an ugly mood. When they found out about it, test tube babies are now a reality, and that began not long ago in England, where the mystery of DNA was first unraveled. He went on to talk about organic robotoids. This is an artificial life form that is created through processes that are totally different than regular cloning. Berter claimed a stunning breakthrough took place in Russia some years ago. The Russians referred to this breakthrough as a providential discovery, something they learned almost by accident. They discovered the key to creating what are now known as organic robotoids. An organic robotoid is an artificial robot-like creature. It looks and acts exactly like a human being, and yet it is not human. A robotoid is alive in the biological sense, but it is an artificial life form. Robotoids respond to conventional routine medical tests in the same way as humans do. They eat, they drink, they breathe, they bleed, if cut, and they can be killed. Robotoids can also think, but they think only in the sense that a computer thinks. Like any other computer, the brain of a robotoid has to be programmed for each assignment it is given. But unlike many electronic computers, the biological computer brain of a robotoid possesses an enormous memory. As a result, robotoids can be programmed to communicate and think in complex patterns that they act human. Organic robotoids are remarkable creatures, but they have many drawbacks. They don't grow or reproduce, but must be manufactured one by one in the desired form. They also have a very limited lifespan, measured in months or even weeks, depending upon how they are utilized. This is due to the fact that their metabolism, while it resembles that of humans, is very inefficient. A robotoid can be manufactured on very short notice, a matter of hours, but after a few weeks or months, it suddenly begins to degenerate physically and mentally, and are expensive to reproduce. To produce an organic robotoid, it is necessary to have a pattern to go by. The pattern required is that of genetic coding taken from a few cells from the body of a human being. In this respect, the Russian technique sounds like cloning, but the technique itself is totally unrelated to genuine cloning. A robotoid is produced within a matter of hours, and it simulates the human donor at his current age. Like any man-made copy of anything, a robotoid is never a perfect copy of the human that is to be simulated. There's always small discrepancies in appearance and behavior, but these are seldom great enough to arouse any suspicion. By early 1975, the Russians were known to have successfully created at least one organic robotoid in the laboratory. Meanwhile, the CIA was coordinating a feverish research effort aimed at accomplishing the same feat. Berter claimed that former President Jimmy Carter had been replaced by a robotoid. Organic robotoids are amazingly human-like, so human-like that it's hard for scientists who created them to get used to the idea that they are not humans. Biological computer brains for the robotoids came as a result of research into holograms. What is interesting about these robotoids is that I never made the connection that it's a very similar concept to this idea that we'll be able to reach immortality by the year 2045. A Russian multimillionaire by the name of Dmitry Iskov has started a project on a quest for immortality by 2045. He, along with 100 other scientists, want to transplant human consciousness into a robotic body or avatar. The plan is to create an avatar of perfection. After that step, they want to clone each neuron with a transitor. In this plan, the brain is also to be removed and cloned. The cloned brain would be then put into the new body, and the individual would wake up in a new body, far more sophisticated than their own. The key then for making what appears to be a clone. So I found this interesting because it's almost identical to the process of how the consciousness or brain of an individual is transferred into the robotoid. The key then for making what appears to be a clone, but they are not a real clone, is to capture the person to be copied and make a holographic copy of the brain memory and transfer it as brain tissue, then to the robotoid, which is a bionic robot. I was watching an interview with Berter, and he talked about how all they need is 2 cells and an encephalogram, an image, trace, or other record of the structure or electrical activity of the brain to create a clone. So I found that very interesting. And then there are synthetics or synthetic automatons. Both robotoids and synthetics utilize genetic samples from actual humans as their starting point, but beyond that, everything is different. These are persons who look every bit as real as a real person, but simulate human beings. Certain tissues extracted from cattle are the starting point. This is part of the reason for cattle mutilations. The process is an advancement of a process discovered in the late 1950s. This 1959 experiment was reported in a book in 1968 called The Biological Time Bomb by Gordon Rattray Taylor. Taylor described the experiment done in France. They had extracted DNA from the cells of the khaki camels and had, to their astonishment, the actual ducks they injected began to change. Their white feathers darkened and their necks began to take on the peculiar curve, which is a mark of the khaki camel. The scientists working under the auspices of the Rothschilds developed this process by working at secret breakneck speed. They developed an advanced development of the process they discovered with the DNA chicken experiment. In the late 1970s, synthetic people could be produced by the Illuminati. And then there are doubles or doppelgangers. Doppelganger is German for double walker, and I've talked about them in the past in the paranormal sense on this channel, but when I'm talking about doppelgangers today, I'm talking more or less about people who look alike but aren't related. According to Fritz Springmeier, there is an ongoing program to find lookalikes for prominent people, as well as a program to create secret identical twins, which are separated at birth and never to see each other. By the use of doubles, or one of the synthetics or organic robotoids, the elite are able to sneak away and perform satanic rituals. Springmeier also went on to say double or look-alike program has been more successful than the robotoids and synthetics. The reason is that people live longer and are more dependable in some ways. The project to find lookalikes for prominent people has been very successful. Plastic surgery has also been done to help touch up the doubles. And then there are underground cities and places being utilized for cloning according to some. Ada, Oklahoma's underground facility is being used to clone humans. The other cloning facilities are turning out weird creatures. Due to the process involved, they give off lots of gamma radiation. Gamma is at the far end of the electromagnetic wave spectrum. It is even a longer wave than ultraviolet. Because they give off gamma radiation, these facilities must be underground. The cloning is done at level 7, the average depth according to one of the men who built these deep underground facilities, or a dumb, is 5,600 feet. The secret government has been building them non-stop since World War II. Underground cities where many of these clones are reproduced and kept. Many of the former Nazi scientists were brought to the United States under Project Paperclip. Simon Wiesenthal hunted Nazis that were not on the CIA's payroll or CIA-associated groups, under the disguise of being a great Nazi hunter, which actually assisted protecting the FBI and the CIA agents who were Nazi criminals. Wiesenthal tried to stop CBS from doing a show exposing the FBI Nazi connection. The Jewish intelligence Mossad knew all about the hundreds, if not thousands, of Nazi war criminals that worked for American intelligence and the FBI, but never went public about it. Instead, they occasionally used the information as leverage against the American intelligence. Oregon Underground Facility is another place that is speculated to be connected to cloning. Bull Run near Mount Hood, Oregon, was discussed. Bull Run is a large tract of forested land with some water reservoirs, lakes that is set up to help provide water for the Portland metro area. These reservoirs at Mount Tabor were for Portland drinking water. The Mount Tabor reservoirs have simple signal fences on their perimeter, and people are able to throw garbage into these reservoirs if they want to be nasty. However, the Bull Run water supply, which is very isolated, is extremely well protected. It is rare that people would stray into the area. People are told that the large tract of land is simply for Portland's water supply. Yet, several years ago, a Patriot military unit reckoned the area after getting information. They were able to identify 3 strongly guarded rings of defense at the Bull Run Reservoir. The area has lots of electronic surveillance. It is either the most valuable water on God's green earth, or there is something else in the vicinity of Larch Mountain, south of the famous Multnomah Falls, which sits on I-84, something besides a water reservoir. Of course, those in the know that it's an underground facility, which the CIA uses. It is no accident that Tektronix in the Portland area does work research with holograms. And then there's Dulce, New Mexico. According to someone who has worked in the Dulce underground facility, the openings on the north and southwest face Aztec cliffs are still in use. Actually, the cliff that has a face that looks like an Aztec on Mount Archuleta has been cemented shut because hikers kept straying into the area. A deep needle detector, which could detect metal or magnetism deep down, could reveal the Dulce underground facility, but people who get this close often disappear. So you may be wondering, with everything I've told you, and I know I read a lot of information that I gathered, it seems that there are 4 methods of cloning, and that each has its drawbacks and its advantages. What really stuck out to me about all of this was just, where is this all going? Because there have been articles published in Times Magazine talking about not just cloning people, but cloning extinct animals, things like mammoths, dinosaurs, Neanderthals, and so forth. This is the kind of thing we see in movies like Jurassic Park. In many ways, some equate the fears of cloning to those of test tube babies. It is predicted that about 350,000 have been produced. But the thing about this is where do these individuals fit into society? And then what about things like designer babies, where you're designing your baby from scratch, which I believe is unethical? Here are the problems I see with this. The being is soulless. You cannot clone a soul because it's against the laws of nature and it never should have been. Who's to say where its loyalty lies? Because while it might be a clone or a copy of someone or something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's loyal. It's like a walking computer. It reminds me of the Terminator. It could be programmed and used as a soldier. Maybe they're being used so they could fight in Armageddon. It may have identity problems, as in mix-ups, stolen identities. It can do something in your name, and because it has your DNA, your face, who's not to say you're not guilty of the crime? There's also this link that I thought about, because many schizophrenics are said to suffer from misidentification syndrome, which is a subcategory of syndrome of subjective doubles. It is the belief that there is another version of them out there. Some may think evil twin or a clone. Now, these people are supposedly crazy. Then there are things like Capgras delusion, in which an individual holds the belief a family member has been replaced by doubles. And they say this is caused by the person's brain being unable to internally link a person's face with the previous emotion, so their brain assumes that they have never met the person, yet because they have memories with the person, they become a clone in their mind. Now, while this can describe some people's delusions, what if some clone was walking around impersonating someone? That person would just be locked up in a mental institution. It really makes me wonder when I started to go through the videos that were put up online showing supposed clones of celebrities and politicians and just how odd their behavior was, like Eminem. It was also interesting to me too because it also went back to these old pictures I saw in videos of the 1800s, 1700s, just centuries ago, where you had people who looked very similar, sometimes identical to modern day celebrities. Now, I do believe that there may be a limit on facial combinations, so you are bound to find someone who's existed throughout history that looks similar to you, or there may be someone on Earth who looks just like you. Some people believe we all have 7 doppelgangers. Of course, that's just a theory, but this whole cloning thing to me just seems very ominous. I don't agree with it because of the ethics of it. I think it can lead to a lot of issues. The other thing is that while people are crying about our planet being overpopulated, if you add more people to it, it could also lead to a decline in natural resources. It could hurt the economy, and it could produce a lack of genetic diversity. And I think the same thing with designer babies. And parents may start to clone their dead children. And this could be very problematic for that child's identity, like the book I told you I read a while back. And then it also just devalues life and family if it is done in a laboratory. We could get a Brave New World or 1984 type of society. So I hope that my coverage of this topic was sufficient enough. Feel free to comment and message me what you think. And if I haven't replied to an email or message you sent me in the last few months, I apologize. I'm working on catching up to them. Have a wonderful week. Take care, and God bless.